Keep your wellness routine going strong all summer. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition wherever you are, with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. Simplify your daily ritual. Go to kachava.com and use code FITNESS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code FITNESS.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Hey, warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 and segment number 3 by Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16. We're going to go with a two-part conversation because, as you guys I think are finding out, the weekends have a little bit less in terms of news and notes in college basketball, and I've been talking about this on the podcast the last few days. It really does feel like the biggest decisions out there in college basketball, they are based around the SEC, so I want to be hitting those as much as humanly possible. We're going to be looking at Arkansas. We're going to be talking a little bit about Kentucky, LSU, Florida with Ruben Chenyolu now being a little bit more, shall we say, on the fence about returning than we thought. So we're going to be touching upon that and so much more. Blake is such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to college basketball, so we're going to have a lot of fun talking about that. And also, he seems pretty confident that LSU is going to be able to put together a nice roster. We'll talk about that as well. Here in segment number 1, we had a few pieces of college basketball news to talk about, so I'm going to hash through those. It's only going to be a few minutes, so we're going to keep this one relatively brief. No real headline guys that move, but we did see Mount St. Mary's get a little bit better, and we saw a guy or two out there, ironically enough, going to and from the SEC. So we're going to be touching upon that, and if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUNet_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I do beg with you, I do plead with you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions. Helps the offseason go by a little bit more cleanly and makes it a little bit more fun in general. But how about if we do take a look at the news that we saw in college basketball on Sunday? Another nice ancillary score for Missouri. I don't think they were going to be seeing Mondo minutes from him, but we saw Missouri pick up Jordan Crawford about a week or so ago to be able to give them a little bit of depth, perhaps a microwave score coming off the bench. And for Cord Stansbury, he was very solid over at Western Carolina last season. He was able to give that team 14 plus points per contest. He was only about a 30% three-point shooter, but he's able to give you a little bit of facilitation. He's able to hit the boards, and he's decided that he is going to be adding on over to Missouri. For Missouri, they're a little bit less three-point oriented than we've seen in the past. They've been very much going with a lot more size, bringing in Bryson Tiller. I thought was a really good ad for them. They've got Kennard Davis that is coming back. They do lose a few guys like T.O. Barrett from a season ago, but I overall think that they've done a solid job with this roster. Jameer Jones coming in as well, so they've got a nice mix of scoring. Jalen Carey should be able to help out the defense as well. I don't know if they're quite a top 5 team out there in the SEC, but with Missouri, they've got a really good recruiting class coming in, and if those freshmen hit, boy, oh boy, look out below. For Mount St. Mary's, they're looking to be able to build something out there in the Metro Atlantic as they're bringing in Cade Ordis. He last season was playing over at Gonzaga, really was unable to get out there on the floor in his time at Gonzaga, but a guy that, in my opinion, has a little bit of upside. He comes over from the great state of Washington. He should be able to give them a little bit more on offense, and the big thing for Mount St. Mary's, they were one of the worst teams in terms of the turnover battle in all of college basketball last season. They both did not generate turnovers, nor did they take care of the ball, so they need a little bit of help there, and I think that he's going to be able to help out there. They've also brought in Red Thompson Jr., who was solid over at Longwood last season. Able to pop it from 3, distribute the ball a little bit, and Wilkins Exacte, he helps them out down low because when Mount St. Mary's has truly been a solid major program, it's been based around their rebounding, and they're also bringing in Mikel Lampart. He was over at the Division II level over at Eckerd. He was supplying 15 points, 4.5 boards, a guy that is able to shoot 38.5% from three-point. So again, should be able to help out that offense. Would like to see them maybe bring in a little bit more size, but a step in the right direction there. And then this is a move out there in the SEC, but yeah, if Mississippi State is relying upon Ashton McGee to take them to the promised land, I think that would be a little bit rough, because he was last year over at Southern. He was averaging 3 points per game. This has to be like a walk-on sort of situation, something like that, which congratulations to him for being added to an SEC roster. And for Mississippi State, they've brought in some solid pieces. Tawan Simpkins from Seton Hall, he's going to be able to help out on the defensive side of things. RJ Johnson, he should be able to help the team out with regards to facilitation, especially with bringing back Josh Hubbard. Hubbard was incredible for the team last year. He was flying over 20 points per game. I still feel like they need a little bit more three-point shooting. Thomas Basong at 6'8" is going to be able to lend a little bit of versatility coming over from Florida State. Keep in mind, under Chris Jans, Mississippi State has never been within the top 250 in terms of three-point shooting, and they haven't added a ton of that here in the offseason, but certainly I think that they made some solid adds. This is one where, again, I think that's a little bit more of a depth piece, and we are seeing that a lot from these power conferences, and what we're seeing a lot of is NBA draft decisions. Blake Lovell, he does such great work over at Southeastern 16. We're going to hash that out with them over the next few segments right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beats and Family Podcast.
This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar. I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 9 plant protein bars, 8 hydration mixes, and 4 mushroom coffee sticks. And now you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping when you go to iqbar.com today and enter promo code BAR20 to get this exclusive offer for our listeners. That's iqbar.com, promo code BAR20 to get 20% off, plus free shipping. iqbar.com, code BAR20.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Blake Lovell aboard. He does such an amazing job over at Southeastern 16, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Does a great job looking at it all 12 months out of the year. I know that he's very locked in with regards to what we're going to be seeing with these NBA draft decisions. He's been doing a great job paying attention to the transfer portal, all that good stuff over at Southeastern 16, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell, and Blake, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks always for having me, Greg.
Blake, it is an exciting time because we're about a week or so away from these guys needing to make their decisions for the NBA draft. And I don't know if you'd agree/disagree, but out of the conferences with the most to gain to lose, I think that the SEC has the most riding on these NBA draft decisions just based on the guys that are currently sort of on the fence and are 50-50 about whether or not they're going to be staying in the process.
Yeah, there are a lot of guys for sure. I mean, I think, if you're looking at trying to project the top tier of the SEC, I think that's where absolutely, some of these teams can be maybe top 15-ish type teams if they have some of these guys that come back, versus if they don't, then it's a pretty significant, I think, subtraction from those rosters and probably pushes those teams, maybe out of the top 25, maybe into a little bit further in the middle of the pack in the SEC. And all that. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're waiting on some pretty significant ones. I know a lot of people, are focused in on Tyler Tanner at Vanderbilt. No question. He is probably the biggest one out there from an SEC standpoint. if he comes back, I think Vanderbilt, looks like a preseason top 25 or probably top 15 team, to be honest, based on the guys they brought in just in the transfer portal and all that. Then I think you've got some intriguing ones. Malachi Moreno at Kentucky. I mean, that's a roster, as you know, Greg. I don't think Kentucky fans are necessarily thrilled overall with maybe what they've done this season. We've got a lot of good players, but I think it's just, again, you're going to compare and contrast and all that. And so if he doesn't come back, then you're basically taking off what could have be a first team, second team all SEC guy this year. If he returns and has that sophomore breakout like many project, and that's a different Kentucky roster. And of course, there's still other players they could get in on and all that. And then, of course, you got maybe some others like Amari Allen. Arkansas's got some they've got to figure out. So, yeah, I mean, those are all teams, I think, that want to feel like they're in the top half of the SEC right now. One of these decisions, maybe the wrong way, these guys leave, all of a sudden, maybe you're moving back down a little bit.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And out of all the teams and all the big decisions in general, do you think that perhaps the most impactful one is Tyler Tanner? Because I just still think that what he means to Vanderbilt is perhaps bigger than any of the other decisions that we've got right now, because obviously a big one is Koa Pete over at Arizona. I think that they really ascended to another stratosphere if he comes back, but if he doesn't, I feel like Arizona's fine. You'd mentioned Malachi Moreno over at Kentucky, and that's going to be a big one as well, but I think either way, Kentucky needs to hope to have a gentleman from Iowa State by the name of Milan decide that he is going to exit the draft and go to Kentucky. I think that that's bigger for them. Well, I do think that for Vanderbilt, if they don't get back Tanner, I think that they really slide down the pecking order big time in the SEC, whereas if he comes back, I don't know if they're necessarily competing with Florida and teams like that, but I still see them being like that top 4, top 5-ish team.
Yeah, Vanderbilt, I think, certainly brought in some nice additions. And I think backcourt-wise, Ace Glass, I think, will be very good in Mark Byington's system. T.O. Barrett was out at Missouri, and I feel like he's someone that, yes, there are elements of his game he has to work on, whether it's turnovers, shooting, those kind of things. But at the same time, I think, again, it's like a system-based thing. And I feel like they will be very good players on this team. They can probably be better players if Tyler Tanner's back just because of the attention that he's going to garner. And that's where, I don't really have a lot of questions about Vanderbilt from that wing, spot into the front court. I think they've done a pretty good job of rebuilding that. And so, yeah, I mean, again, we were talking about Tyler Tanner this year, and certainly, when you have a Darius Acuff that had the season he had, and, Thomas Houck was fantastic at Florida, Tyler Tanner, I thought many times was right there in that same discussion in what was a year where you had Darius Acuff do things we've not seen many players do in the SEC ever. And yet, if you looked at the analytics, Tanner might have been the best player in the conference. And so I think just from that standpoint, he is the most impactful player that's out there, I feel like, for the SEC. Although, as you said, you get a certain guy that maybe comes from another conference who may pull out of the draft and go to a certain SEC school. That would be a big significant addition. But there's no question to me that Tanner is the most, really, I think, again, impactful choice that's still there because of what he can mean to Vanderbilt. And probably, like I said, I think they'd be preseason top 15 if he's back. If not, then I think you certainly have a few more questions as to how this thing proceeds just because of the rest of the roster.
Yep, no question about it. As we do have Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and that's a big one. And I think this guy is going to be back, but another big one is Malik Thomas, because I felt like he had a really nice year for Arkansas. The biggest problem that he had was on his own team. Darius Acuff was so magnificent. He grabbed all the attention, all the headlines, and I want to get your thoughts here, because if he comes back, in my opinion, he's without question the main guy over at Arkansas. I don't know if he can quite be Darius Acuff, but I could certainly see him being a 20-point-per-game scorer. I could see him helping out his NBA draft stock, really helping out a Arkansas team that, in general, I think that they're going to be good regardless, but I think that they're so much better if they have that veteran leadership, because they're going to be relying upon a lot of young players if he does not come back. Want to get your thoughts on Malik Thomas, because I think that his decision is big, and I think that's a massive one for Arkansas as a whole.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think we did say a lot last year, if you take Darius Acuff off of this team, I mean, how much are people talking about how good Malik Thomas was at many points throughout the year? And he was, scoring wise, just as prolific at times for being able just to go out and just score points. I mean, plenty. And I think that's where, the biggest questions for Arkansas right now are all in the front court. I think that's where we're really trying to figure out what this team's going to look like in terms of their front court rotation. But if you bring a Malik Thomas back into the mix, and of course, I think that's where, if you're an Arkansas fan right now, maybe just hoping for a 50-50 split on Malik Thomas and Billy Richmond, at least getting one of them back, would be pretty significant. Now, of course, best case scenario, if you were to get both, which I don't know, maybe that seems unlikely right now, you'd be very, very happy. But I do think it is kind of one where, depending on how things go, should Richmond come back, should Thomas come back, one or the other, it's pretty big for Arkansas just based on how this roster is built right now. The backcourt, I think, is pretty set when it comes to Jordan Smith and what their expectations are for him as a star freshman. Jeremiah Wilkinson, we saw another kind of volume-based scorer at Georgia. If you bring a Thomas back into the mix, or even, again, someone like Billy Richmond, you're feeling pretty good about Arkansas. Like I said, everywhere except for maybe what exactly the rotation looks like in the front court. That's where they're going to need, a Mika Miranen coming in and being someone that can be an immediate, kind of big game-changing type player from the start. Beyond that, Cooper Bowser comes over and such. But I think those are the big things about Arkansas. Really, probably, Greg, in all honesty, maybe the decision, the team in terms of one that we're watching the most, just because I feel like they have the highest upside should they get the best sort of developments here in these draft decisions.
Oh, no question. If both Billy Richmond and Malik Thomas come back, that's big. I would say that Thomas's decision is a little bit bigger in my eyes personally, but Richmond, he's got so much athleticism himself. He's got so much upside that's going to be a huge one. And do you think that there might be any surprises with some of these SEC guys? And I say that in relation to Ruben Chenyolu, because I thought that pretty much it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to be coming back. Many people had him rated out as like a mid to late second round pick, but he's looked really good in the NBA combine workouts. He's measured out well and everything like that. And I still think he returns to Florida, but as we know, for Florida, they're still going to be fine without him, but he was their top rebounder last season. He's really been able to skyrocket up of some of these people's big boards in terms of the NBA draft, and I think that that's all of a sudden becoming a little bit more interesting than what Florida would like.
Yeah, we were very optimistic when we started talking about him going in at the beginning. We're like, oh, okay, he's just going to go through the process and such. But as we always say, you can never underestimate that some of these guys are just going to go out and be very good and really please a lot of the NBA scouts and NBA front office people to say, all right, I actually think we may need to take a shot on this guy. And so I think he is one that my optimism has gone down a bit. I still feel like there is some momentum towards him coming back, but that percentage is nowhere near as high as it was several weeks ago. And so I think from that standpoint, yes, if you're looking at Florida, if, let's say, he stays in the draft, then all of a sudden you've taken a Florida team that looked like, probably got to be preseason number one, no question, and you remove him, you still have kind of the up-in-the-air Denzel Aberdeen situation, which I think right now it's probably hard to factor him in at this point until you see if there's any chance, based on the waiver situation and all that, which right now have no great read on. Yes, you're probably still going to have potentially the player of the year and Thomas Houck returning in the SEC and probably potentially a first-team All-American. Condon, of course, could be in that same discussion. So having that combination really is a great start, but that is the difference, is Ruben. If he comes back, to me, that is either Florida's a top 5 team, top 10 team to start the season, or they're number 1. Because if he comes back, they're number 1 in my eyes, just based on, again, that retention. I think that's just the biggest thing right now when you look at him. And so, yes, in addition to the combination I mentioned with Arkansas, yes, this is probably the one that decides whether or not, your preseason favorite to win it all next year is the Florida Gators.
Yep, it is going to be massive to see what happens with that one. So no question, that is certainly something that is going to be catching my eye. And on the flip side with Blake, I do want to talk about how he does look at this process. Maybe a few guys in which their decision is a little bit more interesting than what we were anticipating, sort of like what we were just talking about here with Ruben Chenyolu. And I do have to discuss what we're seeing with LSU because they finally have a starting 5. They still have a lot of unfinished business, but Blake seems to be very confident that they're still going to have a pretty solid roster when it's all said and done. We'll talk about that and more on the flip side right here on Chris Cozy with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Decent Family Podcast.
This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar. I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Try our delicious IQ Bar Sampler Pack with 9 plant protein bars, 8 hydration mixes, and 4 mushroom coffee sticks. And now you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping when you go to iqbar.com today and enter promo code BAR20 to get this exclusive offer for our listeners. That's iqbar.com, promo code BAR20 to get 20% off, plus free shipping. iqbar.com, code BAR20.
We're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cusco with myself, Greg Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Blake Lovell, who does such amazing work over at Southeastern 16, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He's dialed into it all 12 months out of the year. Goes beyond the SEC coverage as well. He's doing a lot of great national coverage. He's on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell, and we just talked about Ruben Chenyulu, about his decision maybe being a little bit more interesting than we were anticipating. How do you take a look at just this process as well? Because I do think that as we go through the next 7 or so days, it's a little bit of a holding pattern with regards to these transfers. We did see a few moves like Christian Furman heading on over to Tennessee, but I think we both agree with moves that Tennessee made. If Christian Furman is seeing meaningful minutes, then we've seen a lot of injuries or some opt-outs, what have you, happen at Tennessee, where that's not great to say the least. But it just feels like we're in a little bit of a holding pattern, and these teams that they need to fill out their rosters, we're looking at you, Kentucky, we're looking at you, LSU. They're very interested to see what happens here, because that's how they're going to really measure their next move.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think, like you said, it's easy right now, and we get caught up in trying to do our way too early top 25s and all this other stuff, right? But it's easy to sort of look at this and just be like, all right, well, we've got to start really setting our expectations for what these teams are going to be. When you know, like we said, there are just too many significant decisions that have to be made. And so you are in a holding pattern. Like you mentioned, Kentucky, I feel like is one of the biggest teams out there, because whether it is having your projected, probably top player heading to the NBA, or bringing in one of the top transfers should he stay out of the NBA, like those are just things that I think you just cannot, kind of measure just yet, because you just can't make a full read on a team until these decisions are made. And like we said, that's the difference between deciding whether a team is number one or not. That may be the difference, between Arkansas being a Final Four team or not being a Final Four team, and all of these other ones out there nationally as well. And so you mentioned Kobe Pete and all that. So it's really hard. And that's where it's not fun for fans. This is actually where the nervous part starts, because once you start seeing these decisions being made, then that becomes a flurry of, okay, well, are we going to get this guy or are we not? And then if you start missing out at that point, then I think you're going to have some fan bases that are like, oh boy, we waited a month. We knew this was a possibility. And now what do we do? Because it's June and there's not exactly a great pool of players out there to choose from at this point.
Yep, no question about it. The pickings are very slim out there in the portal. Might get a little bit bigger with some of these guys that pull out. There's a guy by the name of Milan, once again, that there are very, very many fan bases are hoping returns to school. So that's going to be interesting to say the least. And I mentioned one or two guys that maybe it's low key, that it's a little bit more dicey than what is expected. But is there a decision or two that you're looking at right now that might go the opposite way of what people think? Whether that's a guy that everyone thought it was a foregone conclusion that he was staying in the draft and he might be coming back, or vice versa, a guy that we all thought that he was going to be coming back to school, and all of a sudden, much like Ruben Chenyulu, it's a little bit more of a decision than a lot of people anticipated.
Yeah, I think, two of the guys that I've certainly had my eye on, and, one of them I think is for the possibility of going to an SEC school, an LSU. Like Alan Graves, I think, is one that I've been very fascinated to see. Everyone's talked about Duke and Kentucky in the mix as well with him. And so, he's one of the biggest names out there, like you said, outside of Momcilovic, as one of the biggest options. So to me, he is one of the more fascinating ones. I could see such a variety of ways that this thing plays out, just because, again, you look at the teams that are interested, what that could do if he decides to return, and also I guess how much he'd probably get paid if he did decide to return versus staying in the NBA draft. And so he's a name out there that I feel like is kind of one of the biggest ones. Obviously played a key role for Santa Clara. He's one that I'm really, probably maybe the most interest I have right now is on Alan Graves, because again, it could really impact a lot of dominoes either in the SEC or specifically with Duke if they were to be able to land someone like that. The other name is Amari Allen, of course, at Alabama, because, he went into it, and we may have joked about this last time. I don't remember when we talked, but Alabama's listing him at 6'8" all year long, and at the combine he measures is 6'5.5" or something. And so, Greg, when that happens, there may be a little bit of a change of opinion on guys in terms of how NBA teams have scouted him and what they expected there used to be of someone like this versus how that changes it from a size standpoint. And so, you can certainly still say, well, it's a guy we already had pegged at 3 or whatever, but I think that is something that I'm kind of curious about to see how that unfolds. Still think there's such a high ceiling for someone like that. I mean, he was fantastic at Alabama last year, but I think those two guys in particular, yes, they have kind of direct SEC impact and could specifically, again, be the difference with Alabama being one of the top tier teams in the SEC. But specifically, I think with Graves, he's someone that, man, he's just one of the biggest names left on the board. And like we said, it seems like there's a variety of ways that thing could go.
Yep, and we thought for the longest time that he might be going to LSU as well. If I'm not mistaken, He's a Louisiana kid as well. And what do we make right now of LSU? Because since we last talked, they actually have a starting 5. So congratulations, LSU, on adding players to the roster. That said, I think that we both can agree that this is very much a not finished roster. We've been seeing them go for some international men of mystery. They've been mixing and matching here in the portal, and it just feels like it's been a really, really strange offseason for LSU.
For whatever reason, I'm just like, and just talking to people that I guess would know, I think they are very confident in what their roster is going to wind up being. How maybe it's taken as long as it has to put together. I mean, there are certainly questions with that. If you are going the international route as heavy as they have been, certainly that can take a little bit longer than perhaps, your traditional just, okay, we just grabbed this guy from, North Dakota or whatever. But I think they have a pretty strong sense, based on what I've heard, that they have a good feel of what their roster is going to be. It's just we don't know what it's going to be yet. And so I think from that standpoint, you're probably still going to see some more international players join this roster. We mentioned, I don't know whether they're in or out on the Allen Graves sweepstakes. Does it come down to LSU, Kentucky, Duke? Is there someone else in the mix? Or simply does he stay in the NBA and all these teams are scrambling if they thought there was a possibility? I think that's kind of the big one that still feels like it's out there and you're just waiting to see. Because if that is kind of their ace in the hole here for LSU, and all of a sudden they get him coming out of the draft process, and you're going to probably add a couple more, I would think, international players who feel like they have a chance to be pretty successful, well, then all of a sudden, again, LSU's all up there as a top 5 team in the SEC and maybe a top 25 team in the preseason. And we're looking back and saying, well, they were the team that took the longest, but what do you know? Well, Wade did it, and he's got Rick Stansberry working his magic too. Let's not forget that, and Johnny Jones on the staff. And so I think from that perspective, I still feel pretty confident that LSU is going to put together a roster that challenges in the upper tier in the SEC. I'm not saying I think they're going to compete for a title necessarily, but I do think with a couple of these decisions, specifically, again, whether it's Graves or whether it's just a couple of these international players, I still think they got a chance to put together a pretty fantastic roster, but it has taken, quite a bit. And it seems like Will Wade at least has some sort of method to the madness there.
Yep, it certainly is going to be fascinating to see what happens there. And I know you're doing such a great job of looking at this amazing game, Blake. You do a great job with not just the SEC schools, but the entire landscape of college basketball. Love to give people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, you can find us over at Southeastern 16 for all of our SEC basketball coverage. Of course, we've expanded a bit over there as well, doing a little bit of a weekly college basketball show where we dive into some of these more national stories as well. So, yeah, check out all of our SEC and college basketball coverage, Southeastern 16 on YouTube. Everything else on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake doing such an incredible job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, on such great insight. So, big thanks to Blake for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. Here in the offseason, we're looking at all the news and notes that we're getting right now, and we're trying to prepare for what is going to be the greatest college basketball season ever. Once these rosters get a little bit more crystallized, we'll get you guys conference previews on all 32 conferences, and then once we get back in season picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I'll do that to you guys listening tomorrow. Thank you so much.
When maintaining your daily wellness rituals is important to you, the change in routine during the summer can feel daunting. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual, even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and much more. So you'll be fueled and ready for wherever life or your summer adventures take you. No fillers, no nonsense. Just the good stuff your body craves. Plus, it actually tastes delicious. But you can try it for yourself because the variety pack includes all 6 delicious fan favorites: chocolate, vanilla, chai, matcha, coconut acai, and strawberry. So instead of worrying about sticking to your daily ritual, simplify it with Kachava. Go to kachava.com and use code FITNESS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code FITNESS.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.